Ford is going bankrupt, and it all has to do with some of these poorly built vehicles that are causing lots of grief. But today we're going to dive into a whole host of questions that you viewers have had, and I've been building up, and I want to address some of those questions. So Lombo asks a question, hi, have you done any research on the 2016 Ford Focus 1.5-liter turbo EcoBoost? What are your thoughts? Thank you. Well, we know that the 1.5-liter turbo 3-cylinder engine EcoBoost has been a bit of a problem child. There's a lot of vehicles out there. Ford's been building a lot of them, and some people say they've had a lot of great success with them. The bottom line is there's way too many issues. You've got direct injection, you've got turbocharging, you've got a small displacement 3-cylinder engine, and an odd reciprocating mass there is a bad recipe. Not to mention you throw, of course, Ford's quality or reputation or lack thereof, and it's a definite recipe for disaster. We know the 1.5s have had a lot of issues. We know the big ones are water pumps, turbocharging issues, and one big one, of course, is coolant ingress into the combustion chambers. Yes, you actually, if you notice yourself all of a sudden getting low coolant levels, that's a surefire indication you've probably got a head gasket issue or somehow consuming coolant. If you also notice white smoke coming out of the exhaust, that's another surefire indication, pardon the pun, that you've probably got an engine issue, possibly burning blown head gasket or some other relatable issue. The other thing I want to add to is the fact that Ford has had some big challenges. Do you know there's also this big recall recently? The 1.5 specifically we're talking about in the Ford Bronco Sports, so that's the Bronco Sport, that's the smaller one based on the Escape platform, also addressed in the comments, are also carrying as a base engine the 1.5-liter turbo 3-cylinder engine. And on top of these other traditional issues we found with the EcoBoost engine, there's other issues now where there's cracked fuel injectors. But Ford's initial response, allegedly, was what we'll do is we'll just put a little catch basin, a little vent tube to drain any excess gas that might leak through the cracked injector or seals, put it on the ground, and if we sense a little bit of a drop in pressure in the fuel system, we'll just shut off the engine. Could you imagine you're doing, 70, 80 miles an hour down the freeway, all of a sudden you have a problem with the injector, fuel pressure drops slightly, and you're forced, basically the vehicle starts to shut itself off. Sounds like a terrible recipe for disaster, but guess what? You're in luck because NHTSA has stepped up and said, you know what, that's not quite good enough. And we don't want a Band-Aid. We want to address the root cause here and the problem. So Ford has had some troubles, and that's in both their Bronco Sports as well as, of course, we're talking about the Escape. They both carry that 1.5. Yes, you can upgrade to a bigger engine. There's a 2-liter turbo engine as well. Slightly less problematic. Those EcoBoost engines haven't been without some big problems. We also have Billing Phoenix also asked a question, does a new Bronco Sport have a 4-cylinder engine? Yes, Phoenix, he does have a 4-cylinder engine as an upgrade with about 245 horsepower, turbo 2-liter as an upgraded engine. And, if you want a little more pep and zip in your stride, that's probably the one to go with. So that's another option. Juan Salazar right here actually says, do you cut your own hair, brah? You know what? I think he was referring to a video, and if you check it back, the video I did when I was talking about why is a used Maserati so cheap. So be sure to go give that video a look. But yeah, I had a really bad haircut. You know what the reality was? I let one of my kids actually cut my hair. It was a bit of a project. They thought, hey, I want to try to trim your hair. And it really went off the rails in a big way. So it's really bad. I hope it's not quite as bad today. I mean, it's not perfect. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think with the extra scruff here, I think we're almost ready for another haircut. Thanks, Sir Juan Salazar. I appreciate the question, and it's always good. It's always fun to talk about that. Another one is, we have Boca Attract says, hey, Mark, what is your opinion regarding a 2017 Jaguar F-Pace SVR with the V8? Would appreciate your thoughts and research on that. Well, Boca, I definitely want to add some comments to that. And I'll say that the F-Pace SVR, we know I've talked about some of their smaller turbo 4-cylinder engines having some issues, particularly on the fuel system. And of course, the supercharged V6 is having some troubles here and there with the odd rod problem. My experience personally, and I'm hoping I'm not knocking on wood, but I have an F-Type R, as you all know. And when you get into these enthusiast cars, you quickly learn what some of the issues are. You browse the forums, you engage, you live it, you dream it. I have this car now with the same engine as the SVR and pretty much the same host of issues you would anticipate. But I've had my car for now 4 years, and other than some pricey maintenance, which as a matter of fact, my last bill that I ended up paying was about $2,000, and that wasn't insignificant. So you're going to expect to pay anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 every year for upkeep, maintenance, service, filters, and all of those kind of things. But from a reliability perspective, the car is pretty solid. Things that you can expect: a little rattly noise from the snorkel from the supercharger. As it gets too noisy, especially when you turn the car off, you hear a rattly noise. Often that's a spring in that snorkel. That can be a bit of a pricey job, but it's not cost prohibitive. It's just something that needs to be done. That's one area of concern, and you're going to expect that or anticipate that in the SVR. Another issue potentially, because it's direct injected, carbon fouling, which then leads to other issues. Carbon blowing out the exhaust. You would anticipate some carbon around the exhaust tips. And sometimes those valves, the dynamic valves that you can turn on and off for the open active exhaust, sometimes those are known to seize up. And a lot of it has to do with just wear and tear. Some of it has to do with the carbon. Some of it has to do with just moisture in the exhaust because of warming, cooling, and then it seizes those valves up and then they fail to operate. So that's an area. Rear differential, make sure you're doing your proper servicing and make sure it's ventilated, because if they plug off in the vent, then it's known to overheat and cause problems with your active electronic differential. Transmission's bulletproof. Absolutely, ZF8 speed is a work of art. It's perfect. It knows what you want to do, and it's fast and furious. It's amazing drivetrain. The engine's pretty stout too, and generally speaking. Again, other than injectors, I'm hearing the odd person have an O2 sensor failure. That's something I would expect. And they're not inexpensive. It's really more about the labor though. So expect maybe the odd O2 sensor to go on you. Things like that are common or not necessarily uncommon on that vehicle. And cooling system, there's a Y pipe, an infamous Y pipe that you would expect. Keep an eye on that. Check out, especially with the 2017, I would expect that would probably have the early generation, the plastic Y pipe that has a seam along the edges that's known to split. If it does, it's dumping its coolant, and quick, fast, in a hurry. And you want to shut that engine off right away. Get the vehicle pulled into the dealership. Now, it's not an immense repair. A lot of people actually just proactively replace some of those stock plastic hoses and pipes. But other than that, it's a premium vehicle. It's got immense performance. And I think there's no better SUV in that price range that provides that level of performance, punch, style, class, and the whole 9 yards. And definitely at that price range, I would give it a strong look. I don't think of too many other SUVs, performance SUVs like that would beat that without going up substantially in money. Audi RSQ8, it's a Lamborghini Urus, but you pay more money for that. So it's a great choice. There are some nuances, but just understand that. So thanks again there, Boca. I hope that answers that question for you. And another question by one of the loyal viewers on a video I did a while back: avoid 2024's most unreliable car brands. Now, this individual actually asked the question about that, and he said, so no mention of Ford vehicles needing engine replacements. We talk about the EcoBoost and EcoSport. We know with their small turbo 3-cylinder engine, the EcoSport as well being a big problem. We'll explain that one shortly. Transmission issues, Ford's had their share. Redone heads, we talked about the 1.5, the 2-liter turbo EcoBoost blowing head gaskets. Engine fires, absolutely. There's been some engine fires related to that. Plastic pieces falling off, and we'll talk about that at the end because there's a whole pile of recalls that Ford's owning right now. Weird seeing as it's been the topic of talk this year, recalls, cheap plastics, valves dropping. Remember valves dropping in the 2.7-liter EcoBoost that you're finding in some of the earlier generations of the full-size Bronco? That was an issue with the valves dropping, and they said it would happen usually very, very quickly in short miles. You'd know pretty quick about it because it had bad retaining clips and the valves would just kind of drop into the compression chamber. Coolant intrusions, again, we talk about getting coolant getting into the combustion chamber, as we're seeing with some of the smaller Ford engines, EcoBoost engines, not an uncommon issue. 6-speed, of course, there's a recall now, potential with some of the 6-speed diffusions, and as well, I believe it was the Escapes allegedly had some problems with the 6-speed automatic transmissions that are now being pulled into the vortex of despair, and the recalls are addressing that. 10-speed class action lawsuits. I mean, the list goes on, and Ford has had their struggles. And I appreciate that New York track rider actually asked this question. What about all these Ford issues? And that's why I believe Ford is in a world of hurt. They're busy trying to develop electric vehicles that nobody wants. Now they're developing hybrid vehicles like the Maverick, which are selling fine, but they're not getting enough of them out to market. Then on the other hand, you've got all of these vehicles. We're seeing a decline in sales of the F-150 and full-size SUVs. People are finding it less palatable. People have less money, but they're more critical on repairs and issues. And Ford's had their share of recalls, and that's why people are starting to take another look at this. And all these recalls and rectifications are going to surefire way to cost Ford a lot of money, sadly, in the long run. They're going to definitely be feeling the burn in years to come. Does it cause to bankruptcy? We'll see. It could be a world of hurt for a while. But here's another one. This question comes from Silver Trong, who has asked, where's the crappy Hyundai? In a video I made about you'll hate these car brands so much that you'll regret it. And he asked, where's the crappy Hyundai? Big disappointment. Owned a 2017 Hyundai LTD from 5 to 33,000 miles, engine broken, bad spark plugs, timing belts, $8,000 in 1 year for resale depreciation. I gotta express this. So if you watched a video I just did recently here, then you'll know that I shared some of the worst engines that you could possibly imagine. And a lot of them are the engines that you're finding in some of the Hyundai and Kia products. Now we're talking the 2.4 liter engines, and a lot of them are having troubles with rod bearings, burning engines roadside, and I shared some of those. I found a Hyundai Tucson, a late model 2 liter turbo that was basically burned on the side of the road. Fire department shows up, smoke, flames everywhere. I had to stay upstream because the smoke downwind is highly toxic. When that happens, you got to get away. So I saw one of those, and then literally within a week or 2 weeks, I saw yet another one, a slightly older generation Hyundai, as well with an engine fire. So clearly there's big problems in the Hyundai camp. I'm not here to tell how people should spend their money. I mean, ultimately that's up to you. I'm here to tell you my experience, what I've seen, heard, learned, and understand from people I know, people I've experienced. I'm telling you, it's not a brand I would buy anytime soon. And some people are asking, well, what about the new Sweetheart 2.5? Well, time will tell. It's like everything, right? A lot of these other engines we didn't hear about until years after. So honestly, I would personally dodge away from a lot of those products in my own opinion. But hey, to each their own. But I'm going to have to be honest. I'm going to have to be real, and that's my opinion on it. So another great question that we have by Lisa Briggs right here asks a question about the Toyota Highlander. What is your opinion? I think they're great. I think Toyota knows how to build a quality vehicle. Now, with that said, there's a bit of a caveat because some of the Highlanders now come, specifically when we're talking about the hybrid versions, they now come equipped with a 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder engine, made it up to a CVT, which drives the wheels, of course, and as well, it's hybrid, of course, naturally, electrification tied into that. And as a package, Toyota does it best. But we know the 2.4 is still a fresh engine. Just like the 3.4 and the twin-turbo V6, we know there's been a lot of engine failures already in the Toyota front, allegedly, with the 3.4s. And the 2.4s are basically a very similar platform. So the jury's not out yet totally on the reliability of that new drivetrain. Time will tell. The older V6s that were naturally aspirated, absolutely bulletproof if you're talking a slightly older one. But the latest generation, I would tread cautiously. Let's watch out and see how that new turbo 4-cylinder engine does. I also, if I'm looking at those spaces, I mean, if you need the third row, that's the Highlander. If you like something a little more sporty, stylish, I personally like the Venza. I think it's going away. Unfortunately, they're discontinuing it, but the Toyota Venza is an absolute beautiful vehicle. And then if you need something smaller, of course, the RAV4 is a fun and frivolous little car, but I think it's a little highly priced if you're asking me. So the Highlander is a beautiful vehicle. I would recommend it, generally speaking. Just make sure you do a little more research on that 2.4 because time will tell. It's too new to really get into it right now. Just a word to the wise. Talking about Ford and some of their ultimate failures, when we talk about the idea of bankruptcy, that's a pretty big, strong term. And I'm not necessarily saying that, but we have seen historically in the past where some of the big OEMs, and we know GM's had bailouts, and the likes of Dodge and Fords, and all of them have seen hovering on that line of bankruptcy or going out of business or requiring another manufacturer to pick them up and bail them out of trouble. And honestly, with some of these issues, let's just walk through this. What's Ford experiencing? Ford recalls 2024, 22 to 24, Ford Maverick over taillight issues. There's a body control module, BCM, that's known to fail. It may illuminate backlights, it may not illuminate lights, and it can be a host of issues. We know lighting's an important part, especially driving in darker light. It's a very important part of the safety elements. That's why when you take your car in for an inspection, if you're bringing it from out of country, out of province, out of state, They don't even care half the time whether it runs properly. They want to make sure it's safe. The mirrors, the lights, the function, all of that is safe. Tire depth, everything, the brakes are good, and lights are part of that. So there's another issue that could, for replacing modules, I mean, modules aren't cheap, we know that. So that's one issue, that 22 to 24s. Another one, 21 to 24 Ford Bronco Sports and the Maverick recalls. And we're talking about a lot of vehicles, 456,000 units, basically related to the body and powertrain control module, which detect a change in the 12-volt battery or state of charge. An undetected low voltage change can result in a loss of electrical accessories such as hazard lights and a lot of the other features. We know a lot of the control modules and the TCU, ECUs are all driven off of the battery. And if you're under voltage and it's not detected, then you could be driving with a condition that's unpredictable and the electronics can basically do a runaway. Sad state of affairs there. Another one, 22 to 23 Ford Bronco Sport and 22 Escape recalls. There's about 42,000 units there. Those ones involve that fuel injector that we already spoke of, already talked to you about. Some of the fuel injector issues you can expect. The fact that they can leak. And there's basically a Band-Aid that Ford's suggesting. NHTSA is saying that you better have a solution somewhere in June here. So stay tuned on that. There's another one, a 2011 to 2019 Ford Explorer recall. We're talking about 1.9 million vehicles, and it has to do with A-pillar trims. You know the trim that up here, that it's known that it could fly off, basically another car run over it, cause a lot of world of hurt, cars veering off. So body panels falling apart. Doesn't not inspire confidence. And then, of course, there's another one, 23 F-150, 250, 350, and 450 recalls. The clock spring, you know, that spring that in your steering wheel that connects continuity to your airbags. There may be a bad weld in there. There, again, more labor-intensive, maybe parts to replace, and that could lead to the airbag in the driver's side not actually functioning or doing what it's intended in the event of a crash. Clearly, some very expensive recalls, some others that need R&D, some more fixes from the supply chain side. Suffice it to say, Ford has got a long uphill battle to make sure that they get these vehicles fixed and get them fixed properly. And with all of that said, definitely got to check that video. Those are the worst used cars you can possibly buy right now. Avoid them like the plague. Hope to see each and every one of you in the next one. We'll see you all real soon. Bye-bye.